In a forgotten village, where the winds whisper ancient secrets and the moon shines down on the earth like a watchful eye, there was a rule that every child knew: never answer the knock at midnight. A warning passed down through generations, spoken in hushed tones by those who understood the darkness that hides just beyond the veil. But Nyarai, young and curious, did not heed the warning, and it cost her everything. The village of Nyoka was nestled deep within a lush, overgrown forest, far from the nearest town. It was a place where time moved slowly, and stories held more weight than any written word. The people of Nyoka lived in harmony with the land, farming millet, brewing sorghum, and living by the wisdom of their elders. At the center of the village was Gogo Mandisa, an ancient woman with eyes that seemed to see through time. Her skin was like weathered leather, her hair silver like the moonlight, and her words were feared and revered by all. She was the village's seer, the keeper of stories, and the one who knew the old ways. Nyarai, a curious girl of 17, had always been drawn to her grandmother's tales. Her grandmother spoke often of the spirits that wandered the land after the sun set. Some spirits were good, Gogo Mandisa would say, watching over the village. Others were hungry for the souls of the living. It was on one of these quiet evenings by the firelight that Gogo Mandisa first spoke of the midnight knock. "Never answer the knock at midnight," Gogo said in a voice low and steady. "For it is not a man nor a traveler who knocks. It is something that seeks entry into the living world, something old, something forgotten. If you open the door, you may never close it again." Nyarai, skeptical and brave, had laughed. "Gogo, are you sure? A knock is just a knock. What harm can it bring?" Gogo's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward, her voice becoming a whisper. "It knocks not for help, child, but for permission. Permission to enter the world of the living, to claim what is not its own." But Nyarai had not been afraid. She was young and full of the confidence that comes with youth. The stories her grandmother told, no matter how chilling, felt distant, things that happened long ago, not in her world. But Gogo's warning lingered in the back of her mind, like a shadow that refused to disappear. Days passed, and Nyarai went about her chores as usual, helping her grandmother tend to the goats and prepare the evening meals. But life in Nyoka, despite its simplicity, was not without its mysteries. The people of the village lived in a quiet isolation, far from the prying eyes of outsiders. Then, one evening, a stranger came to the village. He appeared suddenly, as if the forest had brought him forth. A tall man, draped in a red robe that shimmered unnaturally under the moonlight. His skin was pale, too pale for one who had walked in the sun. His eyes, strangely dark like deep pools of ink, never blinked, and his voice, when he spoke, was smooth but carried an undercurrent of something unsettling. The man asked for water, and Gogo Mandisa, ever the gracious host, offered him a gourd. But when she returned, the man was gone. In his place, a single raven-black feather lay on the ground, glistening with dew despite the dry evening air. That night Nyarai could not sleep. The air felt heavy, and the wind whispered words she could not understand. As she lay in her bed, her mind racing with questions about the stranger, she heard it. Soft knock. So quiet, so faint it might have been her imagination. Her heart skipped a beat. It was as though the world had grown still, every sound muffled except for that one echoing tap. She rose from her bed, creeping toward the door. Her hand hesitated over the latch. There was something unnatural about it, the way the knock seemed to beckon her. For a moment, she thought of her grandmother's warning. But curiosity, that treacherous companion, pushed her forward. She reached for the door. The knock came again. It was louder now, more insistent. Something inside Nyarai twisted, her pulse quickening as a chill spread through her chest. She turned the latch and opened the door, only to find the empty night stretched out before her. But then, in the distance, she saw him. The stranger. He stood just beyond the edge of the light, his face shrouded in shadow, but his eyes, those dark eyes, were fixed on her, staring with a haunting intensity. "You shouldn't have opened the door," the stranger's voice whispered, though he had not moved his lips. It was as if the words came from the air itself, a cold breeze carrying them. Nyarai slammed the door shut, her heart racing. She backed away, breath coming in shallow gasps. What was this man? What did he want? She had seen his eyes before, somewhere. In her dreams. And now, here he was knocking at her door. She tried to shake off the unease, telling herself it was nothing more than a trick of the mind. But deep down, a voice inside her warned that this was only the beginning. That night she could not sleep. The knock had unsettled her, but it was the stranger's eyes that lingered in her mind. They were not human, those eyes. They were something older, something that had seen too much. And Nyarai knew, in the deepest part of her being, that she had just opened a door to something that should have remained closed. Nyarai spent the rest of that night in restless fear. The knock echoed in her mind, the voice of the stranger lingering in the corners of her thoughts. But when she awoke the next morning, the sun was shining brightly, casting a warm golden light across the village. She convinced herself that it was nothing more than a bad dream. A trick of the mind, a product of her overactive imagination. But Gogo Mandisa knew better. When Nyarai arrived at her grandmother's hut that morning, Gogo was already sitting by the fire, stirring a pot of porridge. Her weathered hands moved with ease, but her eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, never left Nyrai's face. "You opened the door, didn't you?" Gogo asked without looking up. Her voice was steady, like she had known this moment was coming. Nyarai froze, her breath caught in her throat. How did Gogo know? Nyarai began, but words failed her. She had no excuse. She had opened the door, and the stranger's eyes still haunted her. "You must be careful, child," Gogo said, her tone firm but tinged with concern. "The spirits of the night are not kind. They do not forgive easily." Nyarai didn't reply. She could still feel the weight of the stranger's gaze on her, like invisible hands pressing against her skin. But there was something else, something even more terrifying. It wasn't just his eyes. It was the feeling that had settled over her, an unsettling, suffocating presence that seemed to follow her wherever she went. That evening, when the sun began to dip below the horizon, Nyarai couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced over her shoulder repeatedly, half expecting to see the stranger standing there. His dark eyes locked on hers. But the forest was quiet, and the village was still. Yet the feeling persisted. It came again, so quiet at first that Nyarai almost doubted she had heard it. But there it was once more, soft, insistent. Tap, tap, tap on her door. Her heart stopped. This time there was no mistake. It was real. Her hand trembled as she reached for the door. She had been warned. She knew she should not open it. But something deep inside her urged her to do so. Twisted curiosity. A longing for answers. Against all reason, Nyarai opened the door. Her breath held tight in her chest. The stranger was waiting for her. But this time he was no longer just a shadow in the distance. He was standing right there, just beyond the threshold. His dark eyes gleaming with a terrible knowing. "I warned you," he said. His voice like the wind through dry leaves, cold and empty. Before Nyarai could respond, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. The air grew heavy, thick with a presence she could not see but could feel pressing against her from all sides. The world blurred around her, and she felt herself being pulled into something ancient and far beyond her understanding. The door slammed shut behind her, and Nyarai found herself standing alone in the middle of a vast, endless darkness. It was not the village anymore. It was not even the land she knew. Nyarai stood in the middle of a pitch-black void, with no horizon, no sky, no ground, just a deep, oppressive darkness that seemed to stretch on forever. The air felt cold, the kind of cold that chilled her bones, yet it wasn't the cold of winter. It was the cold of isolation, of being utterly alone. She looked around, desperate to make sense of her surroundings, but there was nothing. Only the heavy, suffocating silence. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice shaking. It felt wrong to speak in this place, as if words had no place here. And then she heard it. A soft, echoing laugh, high-pitched and mocking, like the sound of a trickster spirit. "You have crossed into my domain, child," the voice said, and this time it wasn't the stranger. It was something older, something deeper. The very essence of the void around her seemed to speak. Nyarai's heart raced. She turned, but there was no one. Yet the voice continued, reverberating through the darkness, seeming to come from all around her. "You opened the door, and now you belong to me." Panic surged within her. She had made a terrible mistake, she realized. Her curiosity had cost her far more than she had ever imagined. The midnight knock was not just a warning, it was a boundary. And by answering it, she had invited something dark and powerful into her world. Suddenly, she felt a chill wrap around her, as if invisible hands were closing in on her throat. She gasped for air, but the darkness pressed in tighter. Her body felt heavy, as though she were being pulled downward, deeper into the abyss. "No!" she cried out, her voice echoing through the void. She tried to run, but the ground shifted beneath her, making her stumble. She had to escape. She had to find a way back to her world. But then she remembered something. Something Gogo Mandisa had said. The knock comes when the veil between worlds is thin. The door must not be opened, or else it will never close. And Nyarai understood. She had not only opened the door to the stranger, she had opened the door to a realm that was never meant to be entered, a realm of shadows, of spirits that wandered between life and death. As the darkness continued to close in on her, Nyrai's mind raced. She thought of Gogo Mandisa, of the village, of everything she had left behind. But there was no way back. Not unless she could find a way to close the door she had opened. The laughter echoed again, this time closer, almost within her reach. "You will never leave," it whispered. But Nyarai refused to give in. She wasn't ready to surrender to the shadows. Not yet. She had one chance to break free from the darkness. The air around her began to hum, like a distant drumbeat. She knew, deep in her soul, that the door was still open. The midnight knock had been just the beginning, and now it was up to her to find the strength to close it. Nyrai's breath came in short, panicked gasps as the air around her grew colder, denser. The shadows pressed in on her from all sides, each one seeming to take a form of its own. Eyes glimmering in the darkness, shapes slithering just out of sight. The very atmosphere felt alive, watching, waiting. "You should have listened," the voice that had haunted her spoke again, now more insistent, more mocking. "This is where you belong, Nyarai. This is where you will stay." The coldness enveloped her further, pulling at her limbs, draining her energy. She struggled to move, her legs heavy, as if the very ground was made of lead. The darkness was not just a void. It was a living entity, feeding on her fear, growing stronger with each passing moment. But Nyrai's mind, though clouded with terror, refused to surrender. She couldn't allow herself to be swallowed by this nightmare. She had to escape. She had to find a way out. She thought of Gogo Mandisa's warning. The door must not be opened, or else it will never close. Nyarai understood now that she was in a place where the boundaries between worlds were blurred. This realm was not just some illusion, it was a realm of spirits, a world that existed on the edge of life and death. She had to find the door. But where was it? How could she return to the village? The void around her was unchanging, endless. A flicker of movement caught her eye. She turned, and there in the distance she saw it. A faint light, like a small flame flickering in the dark. The light was weak, but it was enough to spark a thread of hope in Nyrai's heart. She forced her legs to move, pushing through the oppressive air toward the light. The shadows, however, seemed to resist her every step. They reached out for her, curling around her ankles, pulling her backward. Nyarai stumbled, nearly falling, but she fought through the pressure, her eyes fixed on the light ahead. "You cannot escape," the voice echoed again, closer now, surrounding her. "You belong to me. The door is closed, and so are your chances." But Nyarai refused to listen. She didn't know what this place was or why she had been brought here, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to give up without a fight. As she drew closer to the light, the temperature dropped even further. The light became brighter, sharper, until it cut through the darkness like a blade. And there, just beneath the light, Nyarai saw it, the door. It was not a wooden door like the one in her village. This door was made of stone, ancient and worn, its surface covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The door itself stood on the edge of a cliff, hovering above a vast, endless chasm. Nyarai's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the way back. But before she could reach for the door, a figure stepped into the light. It was the stranger. His face was shadowed, but his eyes gleamed with a sinister intensity. He was not alone. Behind him stood dozens of figures, their forms shifting like mist, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "You think you can leave?" the stranger asked, his voice dripping with malice. "You have opened the door, and now you are mine. You belong to this place." Nyarai stepped back, her heart racing. She could feel the weight of the spirits behind him, pressing in on her, suffocating her. She could feel the darkness clawing at her, dragging her toward the edge of the cliff. But there was something else, something deep inside her, a flicker of defiance. She would not go quietly into this abyss. With a scream, Nyarai reached for the door. The air around her rippled, and for a brief moment, she felt as though she was falling, plummeting through the void. But she didn't let go. Her fingers closed around the cold stone, and she pulled herself through. The world around her shifted violently, like a storm tearing through the fabric of reality. Nyarai clutched the door with every ounce of strength she had, and as the darkness around her screamed in fury, she was pulled through the stone door and thrown into the light. She landed hard on the ground, gasping for breath. Her body ached, every muscle sore from the struggle. But she was back. She was back in the village. The sun was rising, casting a soft, golden light across the landscape. For a moment Nyarai lay still, her heart racing. She could hear the birds chirping, the sounds of life returning to the world. The door, the stone door, was gone. The shadows had vanished. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her back. Something that would never truly let her go. As Nyarai slowly stood up, brushing the dirt from her clothes, she turned and looked toward the village. It was quiet, peaceful, but something was different. The air felt thicker, heavier, as if something ancient was watching her from the shadows. She could never forget the warning. Never forget the door she had opened. The midnight knock had come for her once, but it was clear now that it would come again. The spirits would not forget her. And neither would the darkness. In the days that followed, Nyarai tried to move on. She tried to return to her normal life, to laugh with her friends, to tend to the fields, to forget about the terrifying experience that had nearly claimed her. But every night when the stars rose high in the sky, she would hear it, the soft tap, tap, tap of a knock on her door. And each time her heart would race. The midnight knock was no longer just a sound. It was a memory, a warning that had been carved into her very soul. Nyarai knew she couldn't escape the darkness, no matter how far she ran. It was inside her now, as much a part of her as the blood in her veins. And so, as the nights grew longer and the shadows grew deeper, Nyarai understood. The midnight knock had not just been a door to another world. It had been a door to something much worse. And the price for answering it would never be paid in full. Nyarai had tried to move on, to forget. The days had passed in a blur of mundane tasks, gathering water, tending to the fields, and spending time with her family. But every night the knock would come. Soft at first, like a gentle reminder, and then growing louder, more insistent, until it became an undeniable presence. At first, she thought it was just her mind playing tricks on her. The echoes of that night in the dark realm, the haunting whispers, the shadows that had tried to drag her into the unknown. But now, the knock seemed to come from within the walls of her home, not from the distant darkness she had left behind. It was as if the door had never closed, as if the spirits from that other world were still waiting for her. Nyarai lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small hut, her mind racing. She knew she had to face whatever was coming. But she couldn't shake the terror that gripped her every time the knock echoed through the silence of the night. It was the knock again. It came in a series of rhythmic taps, 3 soft, measured knocks, followed by a long pause. Nyrai's heart skipped a beat. She had heard it before, but tonight it felt different. With each passing second, her dread grew. The room seemed colder, the shadows darker. She could feel the weight of the unseen presence in the room with her. The darkness was pressing in, as if it had been waiting for her, for this very moment. She couldn't ignore it any longer. Nyarai slowly rose from her bed, her feet touching the cold earth beneath her. The hut seemed to sway, the walls closing in as she walked toward the door. She tried to steel herself, but her hands trembled as they reached for the door handle. She hesitated, wondering if she was making a grave mistake. But deep down she knew what she had to do. She opened the door. Nothing. The village was still. The stars above shone brightly, their cold light casting long shadows across the ground. There was no one there. The path leading away from her hut was empty, the wind rustling the leaves in a distant tree. For a moment, Nyarai thought she had imagined it, that the darkness was merely a figment of her mind. But just as she was about to close the door and retreat back into the warmth of her home, she heard it again. A soft, whispering voice, just at the edge of her hearing. "You shouldn't have opened the door." The voice was chilling, its tone full of malice and regret. It was so faint that Nyarai wasn't sure whether it was a voice from the shadows or a memory of the nightmare. Her heart pounded in her chest. She closed the door quickly, locking it tightly. But the echo of that voice lingered, and she could still feel the weight of unseen eyes upon her. The midnight knock had found its way back into her life, and there was no escaping it. In the days that followed, Nyarai couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Everywhere she went, the shadows seemed to follow her. It was as though the very earth beneath her feet had changed, becoming suffocating, pressing in on her from all sides. Even during the day when the sun was high in the sky, she could feel the presence of something. Something lurking just beyond her vision. It was never fully there, but always just at the edge of her awareness. It began with strange occurrences around her hut. Small things at first. Objects moved from where she had placed them, footprints that led into the village and disappeared as if no one had been there. But as the days passed, the disturbances grew. One evening, Nyarai returned home to find the door slightly ajar, though she was certain she had locked it before leaving. Inside, the air felt heavy, thick with the scent of something old, something ancient. The shadows seemed deeper, their shapes shifting in ways they shouldn't. It was then that she saw it, the footprints in the dust leading from the door to her bed. They were not human footprints, but strange, elongated marks that seemed to drag across the ground, as if something had been crawling through the room. Nyrai's heart raced. She knew she wasn't imagining it. Something had crossed into her world, and it was not going to leave. The knock had come again, and now it seemed to follow her every step. The door she had opened was not a door to another world. It was a gateway, one that had brought something back with it. Something that could not be contained. The village elders had spoken of such things, of portals and ancient rites that bound the living to the spirits. They had warned Nyarai of the dangers that came with opening doors that were not meant to be opened. But no one had ever truly believed in those stories. Not until now. Nyarai sought out Gogo Mandisa, the village elder who had warned her in the first place. She found the old woman sitting outside her hut, her wrinkled face expressionless, eyes fixed on the horizon as if she had been waiting for Nyarai all along. "Gogo Mandisa," Nyarai whispered, fear evident in her voice. "It's happened. The knock. It's returned." The elder turned to her slowly, her eyes clouded with both sorrow and understanding. She nodded, her voice soft but firm. "I feared this day would come. The door you opened has a price, Nyarai. And the spirits of the other world. They do not forget. What can I do? How can I stop it?" Nyarai asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Gogo Mandisa's gaze became distant, as though she was seeing something far beyond Nyarai. "There is no easy answer. Once the door is opened, the balance is disturbed. You must close it, but closing it requires a sacrifice, something of great value, something you cannot live without." Nyrai's heart sank. A sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? Gogo Mandisa did not answer immediately. She merely shook her head, her expression sorrowful. The price is always different for each person, but it is always the same. You will have to give up something that is more precious than your life. Only then can the door be sealed once again. That night, as Nyarai lay in her bed, she heard it once more, the knock. But this time it was louder, more insistent. It was coming from inside the walls, from the earth itself. The spirits were not merely knocking at her door. They were calling her back to the darkness. She knew what she had to do. She had to make the ultimate sacrifice. But she wasn't sure if she could live with the cost. The knock was louder now, thundering through the walls, reverberating like the heartbeat of some ancient creature. The air in Nyrai's home seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy, thick with the tension of a choice that couldn't be avoided any longer. Nyarai had heard Gogo Mandisa's warning loud and clear. She had to make a sacrifice to close the door, to stop the horrors that had been unleashed. But the weight of the decision was unbearable. What could she possibly give up that would be enough? Her life, her family, the future she had dreamed of. The knock grew louder, more urgent, until it sounded like a drumbeat in her chest, matching the rapid pounding of her heart. There was no more time to hesitate. The spirits were drawing near, and Nyarai knew it was her fault. She had opened the door, and now the consequences were unfolding before her eyes. With trembling hands, she pulled back the heavy curtain that separated her from the darkness beyond. As she crossed the threshold of her door, she could feel the temperature drop, the very air around her turning thick and oppressive. The village seemed to have disappeared. The world around her was consumed by shadow, the trees standing like silent sentinels in the gloom. She stepped into the heart of the darkness, knowing that the midnight knock had led her here. She was no longer in her village. She was somewhere else, somewhere between the living world and the realm of spirits. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and cloaked in a flowing garment that seemed to ripple with an unnatural wind. It was not human. Its form was shifting, ever-changing, as if it were made of darkness itself. The figure spoke, its voice deep and resonant, echoing through the vast emptiness. Nyarai, you have answered the midnight knock. The door is open. Now you must choose your sacrifice. Nyrai's heart thudded painfully in her chest. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, it extended a hand toward her, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. The shadows around them thickened, as if the very world was bending to the will of this creature. You must give up something precious. Something that will sever the connection between the worlds. Only then will the door be closed. Only then will you be free. Nyarai stepped back, the weight of the figure's words sinking in. I don't understand. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling. The figure's gaze was cold, its eyes glowing with an ethereal light. Everything you hold dear has a price. The life you cherish, the love you have for your family, the very land you call home. You must decide. What will you sacrifice to close the door? What will you give to return to the living world? Nyrai's breath caught in her throat. Could she really make this choice? Could she truly sacrifice everything she loved? The figure stepped closer, its presence suffocating. Nyarai could feel the pull of the darkness, a weight she had never known. The spirits were not merely angry, they were hungry. Hungry for her soul, for her essence. She had opened the door, and now they wanted to claim what was theirs. I'm not afraid of you, Nyarai said, trying to steady her trembling hands. I won't give up my family. I won't give up my home. The figure laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the shadows. Then you will lose them anyway. The price will be paid, one way or another. The words struck Nyarai like a physical blow, and she staggered back. Could she truly save her family, her village? Or would the darkness devour them all? A distant, mournful cry echoed through the shadows, and Nyrai's eyes widened in horror. It was the sound of someone she loved, a voice she had not heard in years. Her mother. No. Nyarai whispered, falling to her knees. Please, not her. Not my mother. The figure's laughter faded into silence. The darkness is already at your door. You have no choice, Nyarai. The sacrifice must be made. It is the only way. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she knew the truth. There was no escaping the consequences. No running from the door she had opened. She had unleashed something beyond her control, and now she would have to pay the price. But could she live with the cost? Nyarai's heart was heavy with sorrow as she looked at the figure before her. It was not just the world she was losing, it was herself. The very essence of who she was, her dreams, her hopes, all of it would be taken to close the door. She would no longer be the person she was. The sacrifice would change everything. Please tell me what to do, she begged, her voice breaking. The figure stretched out its hand, and the world around her seemed to fade into nothingness. The light dimmed further, and the air turned to ice. The spirits were closing in. The midnight knock had brought her here, and it was time to face the consequences. You must choose, Nyarai. Your family, your home, or your soul. Only one can survive. Only one can be saved. Nyarai closed her eyes, the weight of her decision crushing her. She thought of her family, their faces, their love, their laughter. She thought of the village, the land she had fought so hard to protect. But she knew deep down what she had to do. Her eyes opened and she stepped forward, her heart resolute. I will sacrifice myself, she whispered, her voice firm. I will close the door, even if it means losing everything. As soon as the words left Nyarai's lips, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. The darkness roared around her, the spirits swirling like a violent storm. The figure before her smiled, a cold and cruel smile. So be it. The air around Nyarai crackled with energy, and she could feel the power of the spirits surging through her. A wave of intense pain shot through her chest as the darkness tried to consume her. But she stood her ground, focusing on the door she had opened, the door that had led her to this moment. With one final breath, Nyarai reached out, her hand touching the cold surface of the doorway that had begun to form before her. She could feel the presence of the spirits, the weight of their desires, but she didn't falter. The door is closed, she whispered, as the darkness around her began to recede. The spirits let out a final, desperate cry before being sucked back into the void from which they had come. Nyarai's body grew weaker, the light of the world fading around her. But she had done it. The door was sealed. And in that moment, she knew she had given everything. For her family, for her village, for the world she had once known. Nyarai made the ultimate sacrifice, closing the door to the darkness with her very soul. The midnight knock had been silenced, but the price was steep. What would you have done in her place? What would you be willing to sacrifice to save those you love? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling African tales. The scene fades to black, the echo of the midnight knock barely audible in the distance.